We were told this room was indestructible. Concrete walls, steel-reinforced doors, a fortress in the center of the house. But as the storm hit, my search and rescue dog did something that made no sense. He turned on us. He wasn't running for cover. He was attacking the only door that could save our lives. I tried to pull him away, screaming for him to obey, but he wasn't just being stubborn. He was overriding my commands because he could feel the house breathing through a hidden void beneath the floor. And he knew that if I locked that door, I was sealing us into a gas-filled tomb. If you've ever trusted something because everyone said it was safe, stay with me. And if a dog has ever warned you by doing the one thing that didn't make sense, tell me in the comments. This is why people subscribe here. I'll recount this carefully, the way it unfolded. The house had been prepared, storm shutters locked, windows boarded, emergency radio charged. The safest room, the one everyone agreed on, sat at the center of the house. Concrete walls, solid door, no windows. That's where they were supposed to go. The SAR dog knew the routine. He'd practiced it in drills, during storms, during nights that felt louder than they were dangerous. He followed commands cleanly. He trusted structure. Until that night. As the wind picked up outside, the handler guided everyone down the hallway toward the reinforced room. Calm voices, controlled movement. No panic yet. The dog stopped, not hesitated, stopped. He sniffed the door once, then he lunged. His shoulder slammed into the frame hard enough to rattle the hinges. He barked, deep, furious, and clawed at the door like he was trying to tear it open. "Hey!" the handler snapped. "What are you doing?" The dog didn't look back. He attacked the only room they believed could keep them alive. And in that moment, the handler realized something was very wrong about the place they were running toward. The handler grabbed the dog's harness instinctively. "Leave it," he ordered. "Now!" The dog didn't even register the command. He slammed into the door again, harder this time, barking in sharp, furious bursts that echoed down the hallway. His claws scraped against the reinforced frame, metal screeching against concrete. The sound cut through the house like an alarm. "What's he doing?" someone shouted from behind. The handler's heart started to pound, not from the storm outside, but from the way the dog's body felt in his hands. This wasn't confusion. This wasn't stress. This was certainty. "Easy," the handler said, lowering his voice, trying to ground the moment. "Easy, buddy." The dog spun once, teeth bared, not at the handler, but at the space between them and the door, then lunged again, ramming the lower hinge with his shoulder. Crack. The door shuddered. Everyone froze. The storm howled outside, wind hammering the boarded windows, but inside the house the danger had narrowed to this hallway and this door. "He's damaging it," someone said. "That's the safe room." The dog barked again, louder, sharper, and pawed violently at the bottom seam of the door. The handler dropped to one knee and pressed his ear close. That's when he heard it. Not wind, not the storm. A faint, irregular sound, deep, hollow, rhythmic. The house shifted slightly, just enough for the sound to change. The dog growled low in his chest and struck the door again. "Something's wrong under there," the handler said. "Impossible," another voice said. "The room's reinforced." The dog barked again and snapped his head toward the handler, eyes wide and urgent. "Listen." The handler leaned closer, breath held. A low thump echoed from beneath the floor, then another. The handler's blood went cold. "Get back," he said sharply. "Everyone back." The dog backed up one step, then launched forward again, slamming his shoulder into the door at a different angle, targeting the lower frame. The thumping grew louder, closer. The handler grabbed the pry bar from the emergency kit mounted on the wall. He wedged it into the crack where the door met the frame and pulled. The door resisted. The dog barked again, furious now, and clawed at the widening gap. Air rushed out, warm, wrong. The handler's stomach twisted. "That room's not safe," he said. "It's trapping something." Another thump hit, hard enough to vibrate the wall. Dust fell from the ceiling. "What is that?" someone whispered. The dog shoved his muzzle into the crack and barked again, then recoiled, sneezing violently. Gas. The handler smelled it now. Thick, metallic, unmistakable. "Gas pocket," he shouted. Everyone move! Now! The house groaned as the storm surged outside. Somewhere beneath them, something gave way with a dull, sickening crack. The dog didn't retreat. He attacked the door again, ripping at the widening gap, barking nonstop. "Buddy, back!" the handler yelled. But even as he said it, he understood why the dog refused. If that door stayed sealed, the handler heaved with the pry bar again. The lower hinge tore free. The door sagged. A rush of gas poured into the hallway, followed by a sudden, violent whoomp as pressure released somewhere deep beneath the floor. The dog barked once, sharp, decisive, and bolted down the hallway in the opposite direction. Away. The handler didn't hesitate. "Follow him," he shouted. They ran, bare feet slapping tile, hands scraping walls. The storm outside roared louder as the front door burst open. They spilled onto the porch just as a deep, thunderous boom erupted from inside the house. Not an explosion, a collapse. The floor beneath the safe room caved in with a grinding crash, the sound muffled but unmistakable. The dog stood at the edge of the yard barking at the house, body rigid, eyes locked on the doorway. The handler grabbed him and pulled him back another 10 feet. The house settled with a final groan. Silence followed, rain soaked through clothes. Wind tore at hair and breath. No one spoke. The handler stared at the house, at the place they'd almost locked themselves inside. The dog finally stopped barking. He sat, panting hard. Finished with this phase. "You saved us," the handler whispered, voice shaking. The dog looked at him briefly, then back at the house. Because whatever had been under that room, they hadn't escaped it by accident. They'd escaped because the dog had attacked the only place everyone else trusted. No one tried to go back inside. Not after that sound. The house stood there in the rain, porch light flickering, the storm still tearing at the roof like it wanted to finish what had started underneath. Water streamed down the siding, wind shoved branches against the walls. The dog didn't take his eyes off the doorway. He stood with his paws planted wide in the wet grass, chest heaving, ears forward, body angled so no one could pass him without stepping around. A barrier. "Is everyone here?" the handler shouted. One by one, voices answered, shaken, breathless, counted. The dog barked once, short, sharp, then looked back at the handler. All accounted for. "Good boy," the handler said automatically. The dog didn't soften. Behind them, the house creaked again. Not violently, just enough to remind them it wasn't done moving yet. A neighbor's porch light came on across the street. A door opened. Someone yelled something that got swallowed by the wind. The handler pulled his phone from his pocket, hands shaking as he dialed emergency services. The line crackled, then connected. "Structural collapse," he said quickly. "Possible gas pocket. People evacuated." The dog barked again, this time toward the side of the house. The handler followed his gaze. The foundation vent, it was billowing air in uneven pulses, like the house was breathing wrong. "Don't go near it," the handler shouted as one of the others took a step forward. The dog lunged and blocked him instantly, growling low and sustained. "No," the handler said firmly. "Listen to him." They backed up together. Minutes passed like hours. Rain soaked through shoes. Cold crept in. The dog paced a tight semicircle, never leaving his post, never turning his back on the house. Each time the wind shifted, he stopped and sniffed. Each time the house groaned, he barked once in warning. He wasn't panicking. He was monitoring. Headlights finally cut through the rain. Fire trucks, utility vans. Red and blue lights washing the yard in pulses. The dog stiffened, but didn't retreat. "Search and rescue K9, the handler called out as responders approached. He alerted us before collapse. One firefighter nodded. "Good dog." The dog didn't look at him. He barked again, this time snapping his head toward the front door and then toward the ground. The firefighter followed his line of sight and frowned. "He's right. There's movement under there." They shut off the gas from the street, set up perimeter tape, ordered everyone farther back. As crews worked, one of the utility workers crouched near the damaged area and shook his head. "You were seconds from sealing yourselves in over a void." "A what?" someone asked. "An old access tunnel," the worker said. "Abandoned. filled with pressure built up. That reinforced room was sitting right over it. The handler closed his eyes. The dog barked once. Quiet now. Confirmation. If that door had stayed shut, the worker continued, the pressure would have had nowhere to go. You'd have been trapped in there. Someone sobbed softly behind them. The handler knelt beside the dog and rested a hand on his wet fur. You knew before it made noise. The dog leaned into the touch, eyes never leaving the responders. They tried to usher everyone farther away again. The dog refused. He planted himself between the group and the house, growling low each time someone drifted too close. He won't let us back in, the handler said. The firefighter nodded. Good. Another rumble passed through the house, smaller this time, but enough to send chills through everyone watching. The dog barked again, not frantic, measured. Every sound, every shift, logged. Only when the firefighters gave the all clear, hours later soaked and exhausted, did the dog finally sit. And even then he stayed facing the house. Because for him, the job wasn't finished just because the danger had quieted. It was finished when nothing inside could hurt them anymore. The rain didn't stop when the danger slowed. It kept coming, steady, patient, like it was waiting to see if the house would finish what it had started. They stood under a neighbor's awning now, wrapped in borrowed towels in shock. Firefighters moved in and out of the yard with purposeful calm, radios crackling, boots sinking into mud. Utility workers shined lights into places no one had ever thought to look. The dog sat at the edge of the concrete, still wet, still watching. He hadn't shaken off the rain yet. That detail stuck with the handler. You always shake, he murmured. The dog didn't. His eyes were locked on the dark hole beneath the safe room, now visible through a jagged collapse in the foundation. The beam of a flashlight swept across it, revealing old concrete, rusted rebar, and a hollow space that shouldn't have been there. Tunnel runs under half the block, a utility worker said. Was capped decades ago. Records got lost. The handler felt his stomach tighten. And the gas? Seeped in over time, the worker replied. Built pressure. You sealed the room right when the storm hit. It pushed back. The handler swallowed. So the safest place was the worst one, the worker finished quietly. The dog let out a low breath through his nose. The handler stared at the ruined doorway where the dog had slammed his body again and again. You didn't smell danger, he said softly. You felt it. The dog finally shook then, once hard, spraying rainwater across the concrete. It felt like a release. The firefighters finished stabilizing the structure and stepped back. You can't stay here tonight, one said. Not until this is assessed. No one argued. As they gathered belongings from the neighbor's house, the handler felt the delayed tremor of what almost happened catch up to him. His hands shook as he tied his shoes. His knees felt weak. The dog walked over and pressed his body against the handler's leg. Grounding. You didn't panic, the handler whispered. You didn't run. The dog looked up. You attacked the one place we trusted. The dog's ears flicked once, later. In the backseat of a friend's car, the handler stared out the window as they drove away. The house disappeared behind rain-streaked glass, lights flashing, danger receding. The dog lay across the seat, head resting on the handler's thigh, eyes half closed but alert. You weren't disobeying, the handler said quietly. You were overriding. The word sat heavy. Override. He trained the dog to obey commands, to follow procedures, to trust structure. But tonight the dog had chosen something else. Reality. When they reached safety, the handler stepped out into a warm, dry room. Someone handed him a mug. Someone else draped a blanket over his shoulders. The dog sat at the door, watching. The handler took a sip and felt his hands finally stop shaking. You know, he said softly, I almost pulled you off that door. The dog's head turned slightly. If I had... The handler didn't finish. He knelt and wrapped his arms around the dog's neck, holding on longer than he meant to. Thank you, he whispered into wet fur. The dog stayed still, accepted. Outside, the storm moved on. The danger had quieted, but the truth hadn't. The handler understood it now. Safety isn't a label. It's a condition. And sometimes the only way to survive is to tear through the thing everyone else insists will protect you. If you're still here, it's because you've felt the moment when trust in systems quietly breaks. If a dog has ever saved you by doing the wrong thing at the right time, tell me in the comments. And subscribe, because what comes next is where belief finally gives way to truth. The temporary house was quiet in the way borrowed places always are. Different walls, different smells, furniture arranged for someone else's life. The handler sat on the edge of the couch, blanket around his shoulders, hands wrapped around a mug that had long gone cold. The dog lay at his feet, not asleep, present. Every few minutes, the handler's eyes drifted to the dog, checking posture, breathing, stillness, like he needed confirmation that the world was, for the moment, holding together. "You broke protocol," the handler said quietly. The dog's ears flicked. "I taught you to trust rooms like that," he continued. "Concrete, reinforced, center of the house." The dog shifted closer. "But you knew," the handler whispered. "You knew the structure was lying." The words sat heavy between them. The handler leaned back and closed his eyes. The sound of the door rattling replayed in his mind. The way the hinges screamed. The way the floor dropped away seconds later. "You didn't bark for attention," he said. "You didn't panic." The dog rested his chin on the handler's boot. "You chose violence against safety," the handler murmured, "because safety was the threat." That realization hurt more than the near miss. For years, the handler had trusted plans, checklists, safe rooms, reinforced spaces that promised survival if followed correctly. Tonight, all of that had almost killed them. "You didn't disobey me," the handler said. "You outgrew the rule." The dog let out a slow breath. Later, as the house settled around them, the handler stood and paced slowly, measured steps, careful turns, rebuilding his sense of space. The dog mirrored him once, then stayed put, confident. The handler stopped near the window. Rain had slowed to a drizzle now. Streetlights reflected off wet pavement. Everything looked ordinary again. That was what scared him most. "I would have shut that door," he said softly. "I would have locked it." The dog stood and pressed his body into the handler's leg. "Everyone trusted that room," the handler whispered. "Everyone except you." The dog leaned harder. The handler crouched and wrapped his arms around the dog's neck, burying his face in fur that still smelled faintly of rain and concrete dust. "You attacked the lie," he said, voice breaking. "Not the house." The dog stayed still. "Accepted." In the quiet that followed, something shifted inside the handler. A subtle recalibration. The way belief loosens when truth finally settles in. He didn't feel anger anymore. He felt clarity. Later, when sleep finally came, it was shallow but real. The handler woke once in the night to find the dog sitting upright, listening. He held his breath. The voice relaxed. Clear. The handler exhaled and let his eyes close again. Morning arrived gently, light through unfamiliar curtains. Coffee brewing somewhere else in the house. The boy lay sprawled on the rug, fully asleep now, trusting the space. The handler watched him for a long moment. "You knew where not to hide," he said softly. The bush didn't wake, but the truth stayed, and it would stay long after the house was repaired, long after the storm became a story people told instead of remembered. Because the handler now understood something that no manual ever taught him. Safety isn't always where you're told to go. Sometimes it's where the May refuses to let you stay. They went back to the house 2 days later, not inside, just close enough to see what daylight revealed. The storm had moved on, leaving the air washed clean and the neighborhood oddly quiet. Yellow tape fluttered in the breeze. The front door hung crooked on its frame, scarred where the dog had slammed into it again and again. The handler stopped at the edge of the yard. The dog stopped with him, no pulling, no urgency, just awareness. A structural engineer crouched near the collapse and pointed into the exposed ground beneath the safe room. What had looked like solid foundation was now a broken edge, revealing a dark cavity that ran farther than anyone expected. "Old tunnel," the engineer said, "never mapped. Probably left over from utility work decades ago." The handler nodded slowly. "Pressure built up under here," the engineer continued. "Gas, moisture, shifting ground. That room was acting like a cap." The handler swallowed. If we'd stayed inside. The engineer didn't finish the sentence. The dog stepped forward and sniffed the edge once, then turned away. Clear. The handler rested a hand on his back. You didn't save us by finding danger, he said quietly. You saved us by rejecting certainty. The dog's tail moved once. They didn't linger. That night, settled temporarily in a small rental, the handler sat at the kitchen table long after everyone else had gone to bed. The dog lay nearby, stretched out, finally relaxed enough to sleep deeply. The handler stared at his hands, at the way they'd shaken when he'd almost forced the dog off that door. I trusted the label, he whispered, not the condition. The dog didn't wake. He didn't need to. In the weeks that followed, repairs began. Plans were redrawn. Inspections multiplied. The phrase safe room disappeared from conversations, replaced by quieter, more careful language. The handler changed too. He stopped explaining away discomfort, stopped assuming silence meant safety. He watched how spaces felt, not how they were described. And he watched the dog. One afternoon, months later, during another storm, the handler noticed the dog hesitate in the hallway of their rebuilt home. Just for a second, the handler stopped immediately. What is it? He asked softly. The dog sniffed once, then continued on. Clear. The handler smiled faintly. Listening had become instinct again. That night, as the wind rattled windows and rain tapped the roof, the handler and the dog lay on the living room floor together, the house creaking but stable. You didn't give me time to argue, the handler said quietly. You didn't ask for permission. The dog shifted closer. You made the choice. The handler closed his eyes and let that settle. Sometimes protection isn't about guiding you somewhere safe. Sometimes it's about destroying the illusion before it traps you. Before sleep took him, the handler thought about how close he'd come to trusting the wrong things simply because it was reinforced, approved, labeled, and how the dog had known better. The storm passed without incident. Morning came, light spilled into the room. The dog stretched, yawned, and ready for a walk, ready for normal life. The handler clipped on the leash and paused at the door. Lead the way, he said. The dog did. If this story stayed with you, if it made you question the places you trust without thinking, subscribe so warnings like this don't go unheard. And tell me in the comments, would you have followed the volume or trusted the room? Everyone ran toward the place they were told was safe, but the dog saved them by tearing it apart.